Before dawn broke over the palace, three of King Charles III's closest advisors surrendered their security passes, cleared their private offices, and signed resignation letters effective immediately. There was no farewell gathering and no carefully prepared announcement. By the time King Charles III learned what had happened, the people who knew his fears, weaknesses, and private plans were already gone. They had left behind a sealed file that completely changed the meaning of their departure. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. King Charles III received the news shortly after 5 a.m. when an equerry entered his private sitting room and placed 3 signed letters beside a cup of tea that had gone cold. The king read every page twice. His face hardened as he looked at the names: Sir Jonathan Vale, Eleanor Harcourt, and Marcus Bell. Jonathan served as Chief Private Secretary, the official responsible for managing the sovereign's confidential work and daily decisions. Eleanor safeguarded constitutional boundaries. Marcus controlled the palace's public messaging. Together, they formed the inner wall around his reign. King Charles III lowered the final letter and asked one question. Did they leave together? The equerry confirmed that all 3 had surrendered their security passes before midnight, refused every request to reconsider, and departed without waiting for a response. That mattered because these were not frustrated employees making separate choices. They had coordinated their departure, like people escaping the same threat. Queen Camilla entered moments later and found her husband standing beside the table, visibly shaken. She reached toward Jonathan's letter, but King Charles III covered it with his hand. The queen consort froze. He had shared years of pressure, scandal, and uncertainty with her. But now he guarded the page as though its warning might place her under suspicion. A sealed file rested beneath the letters. Its cover read, Crown Continuity, Restricted. A palace classification, meaning access was limited to officials responsible for safeguarding the survival of royal authority during crisis. None of the advisors had signed the file. However, all 3 had referenced it in their documented resignation statements delivered through the private office. Their message was brutally clear. They had not lost faith in King Charles III's health, popularity, or ability to rule. They believed someone inside the royal household was altering decisions and issuing commands in his name. King Charles III felt the betrayal before he fully understood its shape. He immediately ordered every office connected to the file to be locked and every access record preserved. Yet, while security teams moved through the palace corridors, Prince William received an encrypted message from Jonathan. The warning contained just 7 words. Do not trust the palace explanation tonight. The resignations had shaken the crown, but the greater danger was already moving beyond King Charles III's control. These were not ordinary employees fleeing a difficult workplace. Sir Jonathan Vale had safeguarded the sovereign's private correspondence for 12 years. Eleanor Harcourt understood constitutional boundaries that even senior courtiers struggled to explain. Marcus Bell had protected the palace through scandals that could have destroyed public trust. Each had built a life around loyalty to the crown. For all 3 to abandon King Charles III together, something had to be more powerful than duty and more terrifying than disgrace. Jonathan had been more than an administrator. As Chief Private Secretary, the senior official responsible for managing the king's confidential work, meetings, and decisions, he could enter King Charles III's private rooms without being announced. Years earlier, the monarch had called him the final door between the crown and chaos. Now, that door had closed from the other side. Before leaving, Jonathan sat alone inside his emptied office and held a handwritten note that King Charles III had once sent after a brutal week of public criticism. He folded it carefully, returned it to the drawer, and walked away without taking it. Eleanor had always believed that loyalty required limits. She served as a constitutional advisor, meaning her duty was to ensure that private royal wishes never crossed legal or institutional boundaries. She had repeatedly warned that spoken commands became dangerous when no accurate written record existed. King Charles III had once admired that caution. Now he wondered whether Eleanor had begun to see him not as the man she protected, but as part of the threat she feared. Marcus carried the deepest conflict. He had defended King Charles III when headlines questioned his judgment and had shaped palace statements during moments that could have shattered public confidence. The communications director believed discretion protected the monarchy. Yet, in the final weeks, Marcus had begun asking whether discretion had become concealment. His documented resignation statement declared that he could no longer defend instructions whose true author he could not identify. Eleanor waited in the courtyard while Marcus approached with no suitcase and no coat beyond the one he was wearing. She asked whether he had warned his family. He shook his head and admitted that he could not explain the danger through any telephone connected to the royal household. Jonathan joined them minutes later. None of the three embraced. None of them looked back. Their silence carried the weight of people who believed that even a simple gesture of affection could become evidence. King Charles III remembered each of them differently. He recalled Jonathan standing beside him through exhausting state papers, Eleanor refusing to soften an uncomfortable truth, and Marcus absorbing public anger that had been directed at the king. The memories did not calm him. They deepened his humiliation. If these people had chosen to flee, what did they believe he had allowed to happen? Prince William opened Jonathan's encrypted message once more. Beneath the warning was a single instruction: ask who approved the December directive. The prince recognized the phrase, but not the document. A directive was a formal instruction carrying royal authority, and anything issued under that name could reshape official duties without public debate. He searched the palace record system, but no complete file appeared. Then the timing exposed the truth. Jonathan, Eleanor, and Marcus had prepared their resignations 11 days earlier. The resignations had been prepared 11 days earlier, immediately after a restricted royal meeting ended in confrontation. Their departure had not been an act of panic. It had been a countdown. To understand why 3 loyal servants chose exile over obedience, Prince William would have to return to the December meeting that everyone inside the palace had been ordered to forget. 11 days before the resignations, a private meeting began with 5 people and ended with only 4 willing to speak about what had happened. No press secretary recorded the agenda. No official minutes were circulated. Yet, before the doors opened again, a document known as the December Directive had been placed before King Charles III for approval. The order appeared administrative and harmless. Hidden within its language, however, was a transfer of authority that could quietly separate the king from his own decisions. Eleanor had already recognized the warning signs. Palace instructions were reaching government offices without passing through the normal chain of approval, the formal process used to confirm that an order genuinely reflected the sovereign's wishes. Each message carried King Charles III authority, yet several contained phrases he had never used in private. She traced those instructions to a new internal coordination group linking the royal household, communication staff, and senior legal officers. No public record identified its leader. That absence mattered because unseen power could operate without visible responsibility. King Charles III entered the December 14th continuity meeting believing it concerned routine planning for periods when he might be unavailable. A continuity meeting was intended to ensure that royal duties continued during illness, travel, or a national crisis, not to replace the monarch's judgment. Queen Camilla sat beside him. Eleanor remained opposite, carefully reading every line while the others waited for the signature that would make the document official. When Eleanor reached the final paragraph, she stopped. The wording granted an unnamed continuity authority permission to transform past verbal wishes into active royal instructions. She slid the pages away from King Charles III and said, "Sir, this does not preserve your authority. It replaces it." Queen Camilla reacted immediately. The Queen Consort accused Eleanor of hiding behind technical language to obstruct necessary constitutional planning. Queen Camilla insisted that the order merely prevented unnecessary delays and accused Eleanor of using technical language to frighten the king. King Charles III felt challenged from both sides. Irritated and exhausted, he signed only the cover page, believing the directive would return after revision. That decision became the crack through which everything entered. The signed cover page was later attached to the unrevised document and circulated as though it were complete authorization. Jonathan discovered the substitution 2 days later while reviewing distribution records. He confronted Marcus inside a locked office and placed both versions of the document on the desk. During a recorded internal conversation, preserved for legal protection, the communications director admitted that he had already been instructed to prepare defensive statements before anyone had raised an objection. That meant someone had expected resistance before King Charles III even understood what he had supposedly approved. Prince William's name appeared in the altered section. The king had agreed only to a temporary delegation of duties. However, the circulated order described an indefinite restriction on the prince's future responsibilities. A father's caution had been rewritten into what appeared to be a permanent act of control. Jonathan, Eleanor, and Marcus made their decision that very night. If the directive remained in effect, they would resign together and preserve the evidence outside palace control. 11 days later, they did exactly that. Then Prince William received one final detail. A handwritten amendment on the disputed copy matched the ink and notation style regularly used inside Queen Camilla's private office. The evidence now appeared to point toward the Queen's household, and King Charles III demanded the confrontation everyone had feared. King Charles III did not summon a committee. He did not ask lawyers to prepare the room. Instead, he called Queen Camilla into his private library and ordered every aide to remain outside. Between them lay the December directive, the resignation letters, and a handwritten amendment that appeared to connect her household to the secret transfer of authority. For the first time since becoming king, King Charles III was not asking his wife for comfort. He was demanding to know whether she had helped others speak in his name. King Charles III placed the disputed page before Queen Camilla and asked. King Charles III asked whether the handwriting belonged to Queen Camilla's private secretary. Queen Camilla looked down but did not answer. The silence proved more damaging than any denial. A private secretary is the senior aide responsible for handling confidential documents and managing access within a royal household. That meant any note originating from that office could influence what ultimately reached the sovereign. King Charles III watched her expression change and realized she knew far more than she had admitted. At last, Queen Camilla insisted that she had been trying to protect the monarchy from paralysis. She argued that courtiers had become too hesitant to act whenever King Charles III was tired, traveling, or otherwise unavailable. Without a continuity system, urgent decisions stalled, and rival offices began pulling in different directions. Her defense carried a harsh logic. In her view, control had not been stolen. It had been imposed to prevent the institution from collapsing. King Charles III then asked why Prince William's responsibilities had been restricted without his clear approval. The Queen Consort replied that the prince was moving too quickly, building direct relationships with government officials, charities, and senior advisors who were increasingly looking to him for direction. She feared that an alternative center of loyalty was forming around the future king. That mattered because two competing sources of royal authority could weaken public trust and divide the royal household at the very moment unity was most essential. King Charles III pushed his chair back and rose to his feet. The chair legs scraped sharply across the floor. "You were not asked to protect me from my son," he said. Queen Camilla's defiance disappeared. For the first time, fear entered her voice. During that private conversation, Queen Camilla admitted that she had not created the system alone. She explained that a senior household controller had convinced her that King Charles III's informal wishes needed interpretation before they reached Prince William, government officials, or the public. The monarch now understood why Jonathan, Eleanor, and Marcus had resigned. Remaining in their positions would have forced them either to obey manipulated orders or to accuse Queen Camilla's household of compromising royal authority. Queen Camilla admitted that she knew the three advisors. Were preparing to leave. She had believed they were bluffing and urged the household controller to let them go rather than allow them to hold the crown hostage. King Charles III stared at her as though the very foundation of their marriage had shifted beneath him. The king immediately removed Queen Camilla's access to all continuity papers pending a formal inquiry. She reached for the file, but King Charles III closed it and called the equerry into the room. Then came the final blow. The household controller had vanished hours earlier, carrying copies of several confidential orders. King Charles III had confronted the person closest to him. Yet the architect of the scheme remained beyond his reach, and that individual knew exactly where royal power was most vulnerable. His name had never appeared in public announcements, yet almost every private royal instruction passed across his desk. Adrian Wycliffe was the household controller responsible for deciding which papers reached King Charles III immediately, which were delayed, and which were returned with revised language. He held no title that impressed the public and possessed no constitutional authority of his own. But inside the palace, he had discovered something even more valuable than power. The ability to control what powerful people believed had already been decided. Adrian built influence without ever appearing to demand it. As household controller, the senior administrator responsible for managing the movement of documents, schedules, and internal approvals, he became known for solving problems before anyone else noticed them. He rarely challenged anyone during meetings. Instead, he waited until afterward, when summaries could be shortened, doubts quietly removed, and unfinished remarks transformed into firm instructions. King Charles III valued that efficiency because his workload had become overwhelming. The king faced endless state papers, family tensions, public responsibilities, and private exhaustion. As a result, the man who reduced confusion soon became indispensable. Prince William entered Jonathan's former office, searching for proof of how the December directive had moved through the palace. The prince opened a drawer and found the handwritten thank you note King Charles III had once sent to his advisor. Jonathan had left it behind along with his other personal belongings. That detail struck Prince William harder than any official warning. Jonathan had not forgotten his possessions. He had expected the office to be searched the moment he disappeared. Prince William held the note and felt two fears pulling him in opposite directions. Either King Charles III had... Prince William realized there were only two possibilities. Either King Charles III had deliberately tried to limit his future role, or his father no longer controlled the orders being issued in his own name. The first possibility felt like a personal rejection. The second threatened the monarchy itself. Royal authority depended on the public believing that every command issued in the sovereign's name genuinely came from the sovereign. A hidden distribution log finally gave Prince William his answer. Adrian had removed Eleanor from the circulation list for the December directive while adding Queen Camilla's private secretary and 2 communications officials loyal to her household. Eleanor should have reviewed any instruction involving constitutional authority. Excluding her was not an administrative mistake. It was a deliberate safeguard against resistance. Marcus had uncovered something even more disturbing. In a documented statement delivered through a solicitor, the former communications director revealed that Adrian maintained 2 versions of sensitive documents. King Charles III saw the approval copy. Officials received the operational copy. The differences appeared minor. A softened sentence was removed. A temporary limitation became permanent. Yet together, those subtle changes transformed hesitation into command. Adrian was preparing for a future in which access mattered more than consent. Whoever controlled the private office could effectively control the crown whenever King Charles III was tired, ill, or isolated. King Charles III immediately ordered palace security to find him. A guard reported that the household controller had escaped through a service entrance before the resignations became public. His access card had been snapped in half and left beside an empty document case. Then Prince William discovered the final delivery record. Adrian had sent one last package, not to the press or the government, but directly to King Charles III. It contained evidence of every compromise made in the name of protecting the king. The package included no threats and demanded no money. Inside were duplicate directives, private memoranda, and recordings of meetings that King Charles III had believed were never preserved. Page after page revealed how vague remarks had been transformed into official commands, how doubts had been removed from formal summaries, and how family disagreements had been disguised as royal policy. The conspiracy proved to be even darker. The conspiracy proved to be far more than the work of a single servant seeking influence. It had survived because everyone around King Charles III had benefited from pretending that certainty existed where the king had expressed none. King Charles III opened the package alone while a security officer waited outside the door. Inside, the king found marked comparisons showing the exact sentences that had been removed from official instructions issued during the previous year. A private memorandum, a confidential document used to record advice or decisions, revealed where uncertainty had been erased and certainty had been inserted. That mattered because a single altered phrase could transform personal hesitation into official royal policy, binding others to a decision the sovereign had never truly made. King Charles III stopped when he reached a document concerning Prince William. He had once asked whether his son should postpone a new initiative until tensions within the royal household had eased. The final order, however, declared that the prince was prohibited from pursuing it. A father's concern had been transformed into a monarch's command. The difference had damaged far more than a single project. It had convinced Prince William that his father feared his growing influence and wanted to restrain him. King Charles III then reached a recorded transcript containing his own uncertain words. He removed his glasses, pressed his fingers against his eyes, and whispered, "I allowed them to make indecision look like judgment." That admission broke something inside him. Adrian had altered the documents, but King Charles III realized that he had created the opportunity by trusting convenience more than verification. Queen Camilla sat alone after learning that her private office had been suspended from handling constitutional papers. Those documents related directly to the crown's legal authority and public responsibilities. She called King Charles III once and then again. He watched the telephone ring without answering. The queen consort understood that his silence was more than anger. He no longer knew which parts of her protection had been acts of love and which had become acts of control. The consequences unfolded quickly. Senior officials lost access to shared systems. Planned announcements were canceled. Every order issued through Adrian's office was placed under emergency review. Prince William received copies of several altered instructions and recognized arguments he had long believed had come directly from King Charles III. His anger slowly began to shift away from his father. Yet the wound remained. False commands had still been allowed to cause real pain. Marcus contacted the palace through his solicitor and offered the original communications archive. His condition was clear. King Charles III must publicly acknowledge that the three advisors resigned to prevent further misuse of royal authority. Jonathan and Eleanor rejected private assurances as well. Their documented response stated that loyalty no longer meant protecting the palace from embarrassment. It meant forcing the crown to face the truth. King Charles III eventually sent Prince William a message written in his own words. He asked his son to meet that night without secretaries, lawyers, or household representatives. After months of communicating through altered documents and guarded intermediaries, father and son would finally confront each other directly, with no one left to interpret their words. No briefing folders waited on the table. No private secretary sat outside the door, taking notes. King Charles III and Prince William entered the room as king and heir, but what followed belonged to a father and son who had allowed an institution to stand between them for far too long. Each carried grievances that he believed the other had created. Now, for the first time, they could compare the words they remembered saying with the orders that had actually been delivered. King Charles III spoke first. He admitted that he had signed documents too quickly and allowed convenience to replace careful scrutiny. The king did not blame age, pressure, Queen Camilla, or Adrian. He accepted that the final responsibility belonged to him because every order carried his authority, even when the wording had been shaped by someone else. That admission mattered because a monarch could remove a dishonest servant. But he could not rebuild trust without first admitting how the deception had been allowed to grow. Prince William placed Jonathan's message and the altered directives on the table. The prince explained how each restriction had made him believe that his father viewed his growing role as a threat. A directive was a formal instruction carrying royal authority. Therefore, he had treated every altered sentence as King Charles III's deliberate judgment. Those documents had influenced family disagreements, delayed public work, and transformed ordinary conflicts into wounds that neither man fully understood. King Charles III looked at his son and asked, "Did you think I wanted you diminished?" Prince William did not answer. Prince William did not answer immediately. He studied the documents between them before finally saying, "I thought you wanted me obedient." The word struck harder than any accusation. King Charles III lowered his eyes, realizing that his silence had allowed others to define his love as control. Prince William refused to let the conversation end with Adrian's removal. He explained that one household controller had exploited the system, but an entire culture had protected him. Courtiers valued secrecy because it prevented embarrassment. Officials valued deniability because it protected careers. Access had become more powerful than truth. Unless that culture changed, another figure would eventually take Adrian's place. King Charles III made his decision. He would abolish the continuity authority, invalidate the December directive, and create a transparent approval record for every instruction affecting constitutional duties or family responsibilities. The continuity authority had been the hidden group allowed to interpret his past remarks as current commands. Ending it meant that no one could again transform uncertainty into policy behind closed doors. King Charles III then asked Prince William to help lead the inquiry rather than simply observe it. The request was not an abdication of power. It was an acknowledgement that shared responsibility required shared truth. The king also promised to issue a direct statement clearing Jonathan, Eleanor, and Marcus of disloyalty and recognizing that their resignations had prevented deeper constitutional harm. Father and son rose together. Before opening the door, King Charles III stopped Prince William and promised that no future disagreement between them would ever pass through a third person again. The family had finally spoken honestly, but the monarchy could not heal in private. By morning, the world would demand to know why the king's most trusted advisors had abandoned him. By sunrise, the resignations were no longer a private royal emergency. They had become a national judgment on the machinery surrounding the king. Broadcasters interrupted scheduled programming. Newspapers replaced carefully prepared front pages. Crowds gathered outside the palace gates, not to celebrate or protest, but to search for signs that the institution still understood what had happened within its own walls. Then one headline appeared that captured the fear more brutally than any official statement could. Charles approved the palace statement before it reached the public. The announcement confirmed that 3 senior advisors had resigned after discovering serious failures in how royal instructions were recorded, interpreted, and distributed. It also declared the December directive withdrawn. That document had allowed a hidden group to treat past verbal remarks as active commands, meaning its removal restored direct control to the sovereign. The admission mattered because public trust depended on the belief that royal decisions came directly from the monarch, not from unseen officials operating around him. King Charles III went further. He accepted personal responsibility for allowing an approval system that lacked transparency. The king's wording shocked commentators because sovereigns rarely acknowledge internal failures so openly. His statement did not excuse Adrian, Queen Camilla, or the officials who had benefited from secrecy. Instead, it acknowledged that the system had existed under his authority and that honesty now mattered more than protecting royal pride. The London Chronicle captured the crisis with one unforgettable front page. 3 empty palace chairs appeared beneath the headline. Who was speaking for the king? Outside Buckingham Palace, a small crowd watched the royal standard flying above the building. The flag signals that the sovereign is present. Yet its meaning felt uncertain as the nation questioned who had truly controlled the king's voice. An elderly man lowered his newspaper during a live broadcast and said, "I am less frightened by the resignations than by the fact they felt resignation was their only honest choice." The national broadcaster framed the crisis as a turning point for the monarchy. The crisis became a battle over access rather than a constitutional collapse. The question was brutal. Did royal authority truly belong to King Charles III, or did it belong to whoever controlled the documents placed before him? Jonathan appeared outside his solicitor's office and delivered a recorded press statement. He refused to attack King Charles III. Instead, the former advisor explained that his duty had never been to protect individual courtiers from consequences. His responsibility was to ensure that the king's genuine decisions remained his own. Queen Camilla faced intense criticism, and the palace confirmed that the queen consort would retain her public role while losing all involvement with constitutional documents. Public anger began to soften after King Charles III cleared Jonathan, Eleanor, and Marcus of misconduct. He thanked them for acting when internal safeguards had failed, transforming them from suspected deserters into protectors of the crown. King Charles III then prepared to address his senior household. Britain finally understood why the advisors had walked away. Now, the palace would hear what kind of monarchy would rise from the damage they had exposed. The final reckoning did not come through another resignation or a dramatic dismissal. It came when King Charles III stood before the remaining senior household members and admitted that the crown had confused silence with loyalty. For years, those closest to power had believed their duty was to prevent embarrassment, soften disagreements, and make uncertain decisions appear absolute. 3 advisors shattered that illusion by walking away. Their departure wounded the king, but it also forced him to recover something the palace had nearly taken from him: ownership of his own voice. King Charles III formally dissolved the Continuity Authority and ordered that every instruction involving constitutional duties, succession responsibilities, or senior family roles must carry his verified written approval. The Internal Authority had been the hidden group permitted to interpret royal remarks as active commands. Its destruction mattered because no private official could again turn uncertainty into policy. Adrian Wycliffe was permanently removed from royal service and referred for investigation over the unauthorized alteration and distribution of official documents. King Charles III declared that administrative access would never again be allowed to imitate constitutional power. Queen Camilla accepted the restrictions placed on her private office. During a final recorded private conversation preserved during the inquiry, Queen Camilla admitted that her fear of instability had led her to support a system she should have questioned. She told King Charles III that she had mistaken control for protection. The king did not excuse the damage, but neither did he expose their private pain for public punishment. Accountability would be firm. Humiliation would not become justice. Jonathan, Eleanor, and Marcus declined immediate invitations to return. Their documented responses showed no desire for revenge. Each believed that reform had to prove itself before loyalty could safely resume. King Charles III understood. He arranged to meet the 3 former advisors at a neutral government residence away from palace offices and the courtiers who had once controlled every conversation. Jonathan placed the key to the king's private office on the table. King Charles III looked at it, then closed the former advisor's hand around the metal. "Keep it until the door deserves to open again," he said. Eleanor lowered her eyes, while Marcus released the breath he had held throughout the meeting. The king did not ask them to withdraw their resignations. Instead, he thanked them for stopping a process that he had not been able to clearly see. Prince William received a clearly documented role in reviewing major decisions connected to the future of the monarchy. More importantly, the prince and his father committed to speaking directly whenever disagreements threatened to divide them. No courtier would ever again be permitted to turn family tensions into manufactured royal policy. The verdict was final. The advisors had not abandoned King Charles III during his darkest hour. They had refused to help a hidden structure separate him from his judgment, his son, and the true meaning of his authority. The monarchy survived because the scandal was confronted, not concealed. The empty offices were no longer symbols of desertion. They proved that the crown had been protected by 3 people courageous enough to leave it, and that remaining silent would have been the greater betrayal. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next update.